in Dahlgren, Virginia, and he is engaged in chemical infrastructure characterization, analysis, and vulnerability assessments relating to matters of homeland security and mission assurance.
Thank you very much, Colonel Davis.
That's when you're supposed to tell a joke.
Right.
Do you see it though? Oh, there's it.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Next slide. When the 1941, when the Japanese attacked Pearl Harbor, at that time we were in a peacetime situation, and of course they made the attack, and what did they do? Well, history says that they severely damaged our Pacific fleet. However, none of our industrial base was damaged as a result of this. And I do recall in reading some history saying that after the attack, Admiral Yamamoto, who had organized the attack at Pearl Harbor, had said, "I'm afraid that we may have awakened the sleeping giant." Well, we all know the history after that is that we repaired our Pacific fleet, we actually expanded it, and then we used our infrastructure, our industrial might, by which we then subsequently did eventually defeat Japan in World War II. If we fast forward to today, just as in World War II, our armed forces still depend upon our infrastructure, our industrial might, by which they are going to carry out the missions that are required of them. Perhaps the technologies, the type of equipment is a little different than now as it was compared to in World War II, yet it's still essential that we have this infrastructure that our nation has, so again, our military can carry out its missions. Next slide, please. The authority for CIP stems from HSPD7, which was signed by George W. Bush, President Bush, in December of 2003. And it establishes a national policy for federal departments and agencies to identify and prioritize U.S. critical infrastructure and key resources, and to protect them from terrorist attacks. Next slide, please. DoD's policy on CIP is essentially to take action to prevent, correct, and minimize risks to defense of critical infrastructure. The policy also stipulates that the cooperation between the DoD and DHS and other federal agencies is paramount. So DCIP is a parallel and a complementary program with the National CIP program, or it's also called the NIP, National Infrastructure Protection Program. Oh, next, please. What is critical? According to the NIP, we have the 18 or so sectors that are defined by HSPD7. Next. In the DoD view, it's 10 sectors. The common thread is the Defense Industrial Base. The sector lead agent for DoD, the Defense Industrial Base, is the Department of Defense. Now, an asset is critical when the total or partial loss of its operation can impact DoD missions. And so it's important also to remember that DIB assets, which support our military, are also supported by many other infrastructure sectors. Next, please. Just a quick slide here to find some difference between the roles of DHS and DoD. DoD is concerned with external threats coming from the outside that affect our homeland, whereas DHS is really dealing with the prevention of terror attacks from within or inside. Next slide. This kind of shows where DCIP is at. Starts at the very top where we have Mr. Robert Gates, and flows all the way down to, I guess DCIP's over here. That's basically where I'm at. Okay. Next slide. Essentially, mission assurance. It's about understanding systems that support military missions. It's a global process, and it's a continuing process. Continue to identify vulnerabilities, threats, and things of that sort that, again, can impact military missions. The Mission Assurance Division, based in Dahlgren, is comprised of about 100 and some people. We have a mission analysis section, usually composed of those with significant military experience for analyzing missions. There's a geospatial section, which is responsible for the geospatial displays, things on graphs and maps and things like that. The section that I'm in is what we call the infrastructure analysis section. That's comprised of government folks and folks like myself with industry experience, and our job is to characterize the infrastructures such as the water, transportation, communications, natural gas, petroleum, and chemical. We are a authoritative source for U.S. and foreign infrastructure analysis. Our customers are many and varied. For example, Lieutenant Colonel Strickland pointed out, we work at Northcom. We provide support to Northcom both in real-life situations as in exercises. We have provided infrastructure analysis reports to CENTCOM and Southcom. We have customers in Secret Service, I think FBI we've done some work for, as well as DHS. Those of you who may have attended the infrastructure briefing this morning by Colonel Hart, I wanted to just use an example of some of the reports that I have done. I can't share all the details on it, but I can say that the assessments that I were on involved two locations. It started out as a chemical analysis part of it, which I'm responsible for. But what it did show that in one case, that the facility that was being looked at was heavily dependent upon water for its process operations. So again, we're showing how you have dependencies between the infrastructures and how the infrastructure failure, in this case the water, could take down the operation of this facility. Another facility involved looking at the chemical portion, and this facility had a wastewater treatment plant. It turned out to be that the chemicals themselves were common enough that we weren't concerned about the fact that they would be in short supply. What was more important was the fact that this facility was dependent upon wastewater treatment for its operation. So if the plant failed, there was no physical way they could remove something like 150,000 gallons a day of waste. So we do try to look at the interdependencies between the infrastructures so that we produce a better product for our customers. Are there any questions?
Doug, I have one.
Yes, sir.
On that note that you just talked about. And I guess my question would be, for an industry that has a certain capability, is that identified by the government that says that your capability, whatever you manufacture or whatever you produce, is critical? Do they request that support to come out and do these assessments? Is it mandated by a contract that they meet certain requirements? Do they know that they or maybe a unique capability? And if so, is there any sort of funding that supports that, or is it strictly on the company to increase their water supply, shortage, et cetera?
The ones who have been on have been funded, usually through the government. One of the State Department, the Army, would be funded, or some other government agency would fund it. And then the company would be required to cooperate, and we would do the assessment of that particular facility. And we do this sometimes via what we call tabletop, means we do it from the office. In some cases, we do send a full team out to actually do the assessment. And then within that assessment group, we're looking for not only our own respective infrastructures and how that facility depends upon that infrastructure. We're looking for the interrelationships between the infrastructures, because sometimes that uncovers another type of vulnerability whereby the facility could be impacted. And we want to do everything we can and identify all those things so that the harbor management can effectively assess the associated risks with a particular operation. And so to do that, they have to get all the facts. Our job at Dahlgren, what we do is we put together that full report, and so that they can see what's there.
Right, so that information, that requirement that maybe have to increase the water treatment for that plant just basically increases the risk?
We do make them aware of these particular risks. We can't, in our group, we don't simply mandate that you got to do this, you got to do that. We might suggest that.
Part of the assessment.
Yeah, part of the assessment. We might say, you have this little problem over here. You might want to take a look at it. It's interesting you mentioned that, because sometimes we go for an assessment, and I think some of the people are a little fearful that we're kind of like OSHA, or EPA, so they think that we're coming in to, break kneecaps, stuff like that. And we're not here for, we're not here for that purpose. If, for example, we did something for the place near Richmond, and we kind of told them, they said, well, look, we found this. We do it privately, and said, we found this. It won't be in the report. You might want to take a look at this, because it's good information that we feel would help them improve their operation. But we're not there to penalize them in any way. Yes. Any questions?
I got a question about
Yes.
when you step back from all of these infrastructures. It turns out that there's technically trained people that are running it on a day-to-day basis, right? You doing any analysis on that, on what we would need to augment those people? How would we work with them?
I'm not quite sure I understand the
Okay,
question.
any one of these infrastructures has
Yes.
a control center. You just can't go in and run a control center. It needs training. Some of these things might take a couple of years, 5, 6, 10 years to learn how they work.
Okay.
Right. Are you looking at that aspect of it as well as the risk and the process and the stuff like that?
As best I recall, we don't look at the shall we say, the skills or the competency of the people that are there. We'll have to assume for the moment that the people are qualified.
It's running. It's
running,
yeah.
right.
Okay.
We look for some things like they might not be aware of, and say, gee, you have your sole source for water. Are you aware of this? Are you aware of that? That type of thing. And are you aware, for example, like the example I used, if you only have a sole source of water for your operation, we might ask them, do you have adequate spare parts for your pumps? Okay, what if your pump got destroyed somehow?
If you'd ask me that question at the end of mine.
Okay.
So, any other questions?
That's it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
And our next